Jai Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Jaya Girivaradhari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Jaya Girivaradhari. Hare Krishna. I was wondering if someone from Krishna village would come today. Yeah, it's good. There's no one here. Because the topic is pretty scary a little bit. And it's postgraduate study of literature.
What's your name?
Well, I can read from my... Yeah, well, it's actually Chaitanya Charitamrita. Yeah, Adi-lila. Jai Jai Shri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda. Jai Advaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhaktavrinda. Jai Jai Shri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda.
Jai Jai Shri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda.
Jai Advaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhaktavrinda. Jai Jai Shri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda. Jai Advaita Chandra Jai Gaura Bhaktavrinda. So we are reading from Adi-lila, chapter 10, text 147. Is that on the board? Bada Haridasa Ara Chota Haridasa Dui Kirtaniya Rahe Mahaprabhura Pasha Bada Haridasa Ara Chota Haridasa Dui Kirtaniya Rahe Mahaprabhura Pasha Bada Haridasa Ara Chota Haridasa Dui Kirtaniya Rahe Mahaprabhura Pasa. Okay, the board is ready now. Thank you. Word for word. Bada Haridasa of the name Bada Haridasa. Ara and Chota Haridasa of the name Chota Haridasa. Dui Kirtaniya, both of them were good singers. Rahe, stay. Mahaprabhura, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Pasha, with. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. Bada Haridasa and Chota Haridasa, the 24th and 25th devotees in Nilachala, were good singers who always accompanied Lord Chaitanya. Purport. Chota Haridasa was later banished from the company of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, as stated in the Adi-lila chapter 2. That's all, the whole purport. So I will relate to that Adi-lila and read a little bit from that pastime, and then we'll speak a little bit about that, if you don't mind. So it's described in Adi-lila chapter, I guess, 10. chapter 2. And it starts the verse. Well, anyone knows who Chota Haridasa is and what's happened to him? Allah, Prabhu.
Prabhu rejected him, didn't he, for the association of a woman?
Yeah. And?
And he became a mechanical prophet. He took his own life and...
Yeah, he committed suicide. So that's why I didn't really want Krishna village guys. Because it's kind of very sensitive topics. So we go a little bit back in time. So it was a time when Mahaprabhu traveled South India. He then traveled North India, and then he settled in Jagannath Puri, and he brought some of his close associates with him. There was Gadadhar Pandya, there was Sarup Damadara, there was Haridasa Thakur, who is mentioned here as Bada Haridasa. Chota Haridasa means, Chota literally means small, or as Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada refers to him as Junior Haridasa. So everyone knew that Haridasa Thakur, Bada Haridasa, was a very advanced devotee, even though he never accepted sannyasa formally, because he was, from Malaysia family, so he didn't do that formally, but he was very renounced and very attached to holy name, and he was a pure devotee. Chota Haridasa, he formally accepted sannyasa order of life, and he was a good singer, kirtani, and that's what he very much loved to do for Lord Chaitanya's pleasure. He had a very nice voice, and he was very devoted, and his kirtans was very pleasing to Lord Chaitanya. So we go back to, I think it's text 102. Technology. One day, Bhagavanacharya invited Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to dine at his home. Thus, he was preparing rice and various types of vegetables. So, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, by that time, he was already a sannyasi, and sannyasi usually go door to door and beg alms and some food for. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he didn't have to do that because he stayed at Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya's house, and Sarvabhauma was royal priest, so he provided everything for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's. But other sannyasis, including Chota Haridas, they would sometimes go door to door and beg alms. And but sometimes, mostly from the Grihastha families, but sometimes male Grihastha would be out there working or something like that, and only female Grihastha, women would be at home, and it's kind of a little bit dangerous situation because sannyasis are not allowed to interact with women privately. And that's what actually Ravana did when he tried to abduct Sita. So he went to their ashram when Lakshmana and Ramachandra were away. Text 102. A devotee named Chota Haridasa used to sing for Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Bhagavanacharya called him to his home and spoke as follows. Please go to the sister of Shiki Mahidi. In my name, ask her for a manna of white rice and bring it here. And there is a little purport here explaining what white rice is and what the brown rice is. If you want, I can read it, it's just a few lines. In India, Shukla Chola, or white rice, is also called Atapa Chola, or rice that has not been boiled before being husked. Another kind of rice called sitha chola, brown rice, is boiled before being husked. Generally, first-class fine white rice is required for offerings to the deity. So we know, at least in Australia, it's, the brown rice is kind of more healthy, and in restaurants it's even more expensive. Text 104. Shiki Mahiri's sister was named Madhavi Devi. She was an elderly lady who always performed austerities. She was very advanced in devotional service. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu accepted her as having formerly been an associate of Srimati Radharani. In the entire world, 3.5 people were his intimate devotees. The three were Swarupa Damodara Goswami, Ramananda Rai, and Shiki Mahiti. And the half a person was Shiki Mahiti's sister. Sorry, ladies. You counted as half a person. Best half. After begging the rice from her, Junior Haridasa brought it to Bhagavanacharya, who was very pleased to see its quality. In great affection, Bhagavanacharya cooked varieties of vegetables and other preparations dear to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He also obtained remnants of food from Lord Jagannatha and digestive aids such as ground ginger and also lime with salt. It's interesting that we can gain some knowledge about even Ayurveda. Digestive aids, lime and salt. We kind of probably not heard about that, but scriptural evidence. Where did you get such fine rice, Lord? The Lord asked. Bhagavanacharya replied, I got it by taking from Madhavi Devi. When Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked who had begged the rice and brought it back, Bhagavanacharya mentioned the name of Junior Haridasa. Praising the quality of the rice, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu partook of the prasadam. Then, after returning to his residence, he gave the following order to Govinda, his personal assistant. Now, important message. From this day forward, do not allow Chota Haridasa to come here. So that was a devastating message to Chota Haridasa, because Lord Chaitanya was his life and soul. It was very painful. So devotees tried to pacify him. They tried to, approach Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and make him change his mind. And they were asking what's happened. And he said that the person who took sannyasa is not allowed to intimately talk with women. So we don't know exactly what happened. It's not described in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. It's not described. As far as I know, I heard that there was 27 biographies of Lord Chaitanya. 9 of them are still present, and 3 of them, the most, as we know, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Chaitanya Bhagavatam, and Chaitanya Mangala, those which are referred by our acharyas. And even Chaitanya Charitamrita does not describe exactly what happened. There is a little bit of contradictions going on because, for example, Madhavi Devi is mentioned here, but she was 80 years old at that time. And in the Bhagavad Gita, in the purport, in the 16th chapter, don't remember the verse, in the purport, Prabhupada is saying that Chota Haridasa was lustily glancing at the young woman. In some lecture I heard that that was young maidservant in their house, Shiki Mahiti's house. But again, it's not described. Well, we'll get straight to the point. So he was banished, Chota Haridasa was banished, and he fasted for 3 days, and nothing could pacify him. And then devotees came and they said, well, Lord Chaitanya accepted an angry mood, but just wait for a few days and it will subside and get back into his association, but nothing happened. And then I think it was Bhagavanacharya who he was a god brother of he was a disciple of Madhavendra Puri. I might have mixed up. So he was kind of elderly to Lord Chaitanya, and he pleaded, please bring Chota Haridasa back. And Lord Chaitanya said, well, you can have association with him, nothing wrong, but then I will go. I will leave you and go to Allahabad and stay there. So he was pretty staunch, and he didn't budge. But then devotees, they went to Chota Haridasa and they said, well, just eat prasadam, you're not going to be fasting, and dying. Just take prasadam and wait. So 1 year passed since then. He was never accepted into Lord Chaitanya's association. So what he did is he went to Prayag and he drowned himself in the the confluence of Ganga and Yamuna. And I can read a little bit of the pastimes after that. I think it's easy just to turn pages and hard copy them to scroll on the devices. Yeah, it was not Bhagavanacharya, but Paramananda Puri. One day Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu inquired from the devotees, where is Haridasa? Now you may bring him here. The devotees all replied, one night at the end of a full year, junior Haridasa got up and went away. No one knows where he has gone. While hearing the devotees lament, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was mildly smiling. Thus all the devotees were very much astonished. One day Jagadananda, Swarupa, Govinda, Kashishvara, Shankara, Damadara and Mukunda all went to bathe in the sea. They could hear Haridasa singing from a distant place, as if calling them in his original voice. No one could see him, but they could hear him singing in a sweet voice. Therefore, all the devotees, headed by Govinda, made this guess. Haridasa must have committed suicide by drinking poison, and because of his sinful act, he has now become a Brahman, a ghost. We cannot see his material form, they said, but still we hear his sweet singing. Therefore, he must have become a ghost. Swarupa Damadara, however, protested. This is a false guess. Junior Haridasa chanted the Hare Krishna mantra throughout his entire life and served the Supreme Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Moreover, he is dear to the Lord and has died in a holy place. Haridasa cannot have been degraded. He must have attained liberation. This is a pastime of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's. You will all understand it later. So, I just wanted to put up a little short film compiled by devotees about Vishnujana Swami, because the topics are very much related. As you know, Vishnujana Swami was a wonderful devotee, very good kirtani, and very dear to Srila Prabhupada at some point. I will read about that a little later, but we'll just watch that movie and then I'll read some of the remembrances, and if someone doesn't know what it is all about. You'll see it at the end of the movie, and in those remembrances that I will read. But first, please watch it.
We had 8 Sankirtan parties going out every day. We would come back and then at night go out again. We would stay out till 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, every night. And the whole spirit behind this, I have to say, was Vishnujan. This person could chant Hare Krishna on a drum all day long. He must have been a divine personality, because I don't see how a human could do that. The people were anxious to go on Sankirtan, and it was such a wonderful sight to see. People would watch us for hours and hours and hours. It was so attractive. And then
but also because he touched my heart in 1972 by his preaching and by his example. And he was a very empowered preacher and dedicated servant to Srila Prabhupada. He was known as the Pied Piper. He was very charismatic and attracted many people by his kirtan. He was always known for leading kirtans and dancing through the streets, and devotees would chant behind him, and then other people would just kind of come in and cluster behind and follow. And my first contact with him was in kirtan. It was spring in 1973, and he was visiting Boston, and he was chanting Harinam on the park in Boston. And I had visited the temple a few times, and when I came to the temple, everybody told me, there's a sannyasi here, you gotta see him, you gotta see him. So I said, where is he? He says, out chanting in the streets. So the devotees immediately took me to where he was chanting. And he was sitting and playing the harmonium. And I sat down right in front of him. And I was really studying him. Because I think he might have been the first sannyasi I met, actually. So I wanted to know, what is a sannyasi? So I just sat and I studied and looked at him, the way he was chanting, and I was looking at his eyes, I was looking at the features on his face, and a very, very blissful smile. He would oftentimes chant, and then he would stop and he would speak. But after studying him for some time, I looked at him and I was thinking, he's really relishing Krishna consciousness. I remember turning to the devotee who brought me to see him, and I said to him, I said, if this is what it means to be a devotee, I want to join. And actually I joined very shortly afterwards. So he has a special place in my heart, because he was very, very much attracted me to Krishna consciousness.
At that point, Vishnujan had his black nylon gloves on with little pieces of tile taped underneath on the outside of the gloves, so he could just slip the gloves on, and he'd have pieces of tile in all the places where his hands would hit the mridanga shell. Because, mridanga after a while can cut your hands to ribbons. So to protect his hands, he had these gloves that he could slip on and off that already had taped pieces of tile in place, so he could tap the drum all day without hurting his hands. And he used to play that drum like that and lead that kirtan every day, day in, day out. Between the street and the temple artiques, he probably led kirtan 10 hours a day in and day out. I'm not kidding. An average of 3.5 to 4 hours in the afternoon, an average of the same at night, and then at least 3 or 4 big kirtans in the temple throughout the day, you know. Add it all together, probably 10 hours a day, chanting at the top of his lungs. And he never, ever seemed to be, you know, tired of doing it. His dedication was philosophically based. There was some, you know, it's possible to be sentimentally based or emotionally based only. Vishnujan was actually very philosophical. He could give a good lecture.
We all went down to Hollywood Boulevard, and we used to chant in front of diamond gyms. So we would have devotees on both sides of the kirtan party pushing people into that triangular area so that the sidewalk was clear, so the police were happy, we were happy, only Diamond Jim's was unhappy. And he would have us in a half moon like this. He said, just like the eye of Krishna, he used to tell us. You know, we'd have men on either side and the women would be protected on the inside, and we would dance like this. You know. And he would stand at the very end of us, looking down the street. He can see the sidewalk, he can see the street. You know, and we had a Hollywood melody. We had a Hollywood Boulevard melody. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And Vishnujan he would be playing furiously. He said, we don't want any gaps for Maya to come. So he was just chanting and chanting, and we were all jumping up and down and dancing back and forth. And all of a sudden we saw Vishnujan's eyes get big like saucers. And he said, Prabhupada. And he hit the street. Now, we were just looking toward Diamond Jim's. Our back was to the street, so we couldn't figure out what was going on. But we figured he'd seen something behind us. So we all turned around, and Prabhupada was there. I just described what we are. And Prabhupada was there making pranams to us. He had his hand in his bead bag, and he was making pranams. That he was so grateful to see us out there in this hellish place called Hollywood Boulevard, spreading Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan. Prabhupada was so grateful. He was making pranams to us.
When I would come down from Berkeley to LA to see Prabhupada, you would fall asleep in the Brahmacharya ashram to Vishnujan playing harmonium. And then you would wake up in the morning to Vishnujan playing harmonium. And you would never know if he ever even slept. I mean, maybe he did. I'm not saying he didn't sleep, but I mean, that was like how non-stop Krishna conscious Vishnujan was. You sense that about being in Vishnujan's presence, that he was just an otherworldly being. To see Vishnujan and Srila Prabhupada was the most wonderful thing to watch. And of course, everybody wanted to have Prabhupada lead kirtan when Prabhupada was there. But Srila Prabhupada would always want Vishnujan to lead kirtan. And when they would look at each other, you'd start crying sometimes just to see Prabhupada and Vishnujan looking at each other. You know, there was just so much love, the way Prabhupada would look at them. You never saw anybody ever look at anybody like that. You know, Vishnujan would always be emotional, get teary-eyed.
Again, for some of you that weren't here yesterday when we were chanting, this is called mantra meditation. The word man means mind, the word tra means to deliver or free. So this chanting of Hare Krishna and other songs that we'll be singing are meant to free our mind of all misconceptions of ourselves and everything else around us. By misconception, we mean that because of our attachment for our body, we think of ourselves as being young or old, pretty or ugly, black or white, man or woman, American or Indian. These are called bodily designations. They begin with this body and they also end with this body. But the first thing we realize through this chanting process is that I'm not this body. The body's a vehicle, just like you may be driving in a black or white car, pretty or ugly car, old or young, American or Indian car. But you're not the car, you're the driver of the car. You have to put something in it to make it run, and finally you have to take it to the body shop to get it fixed, and then you have to get out of it, then get into another one. Similarly, this body. You have to put food in it, make it run, take it to the body shop, and if it's wrecked, and finally you have to get out of it, get into another or whatever you can.
Winter of 1973, Vishnujana Swami's bus had burned down somewhere in America, and while Kalenda and the BBT were building him a new bus, he came to sail down the Ganges and do Harinam Sankirtan and Prasadam distribution, and he had a slideshow to show these villages. And Vishnujan was amazing, doing kirtan through the villages. I mean, people were asking us to take their children with us, and you know, they were just in shock. And we'd have a program every night with a big slideshow. I mean, and show them London Rath Yatra and San Francisco Rath Yatra. They were blown away. You know, their Hinduism was actually, you know, spreading all over the world, because we were the first Western Hindus they'd ever seen. And it wasn't just that we were a handful. We represented this movement with temples and festivals all over the world. So, of course, who's the person responsible for all this is Prabhupada. I mean, the villagers were just enormously impressed. Anyway, we sailed down the Ganges for 40 days and nights. And we got stopped in northern Bengal by a huge dam called Farakka Barrage. So then we took trips down to Calcutta, where we met Prabhupada. So we had some kind of, you know, little camera with us, but somebody had a shaky hand. It all came out looking like ghostly images, so we didn't have anything to show Prabhupada. But when we were reporting in the room about it, Vishnujana Swami said that we had distributed 500 sets of japa beads. And Prabhupada looked very concerned. He said, "You cannot do that. Now they think you are their guru." So he was a little upset that we didn't know these subtleties of Indian culture, that if you give someone beads and tell them to chant Hare Krishna, you've just given them Harinam initiation, and that's how they see it. So I think there must be a lot of villages along the Ganges where they have this memory of this bronze god from the West who looked like Lord Chaitanya and gave them initiation.
Even as I used to come to the temple in Montreal, Vishnujan Swami was a known name. He was known for his wonderful kirtans and his chanting Hare Krishna. He was a musician prior to joining Krishna consciousness, and was a friend of Tamal Krishna Maharaj, and they joined together in California. Vishnujana Maharaj would go from campus to campus chanting. He would take the deities out on a palanquin. He would sing and preach and make devotees. And then later on, Tamal Krishna Maharaj came and joined them, and they then made the Radha Damodar Traveling Sankirtan Party, book distribution party, which was then, for that period of time, 75, 76, was the biggest Sankirtan party in the world. They were distributing a phenomenal amount of books. They had 6 buses and 20 vans, 120 devotees distributing books. It was wonderful. The book, Radha Damodar Vilas, describes about Vishnujan Maharaj's influence on many others. And I think I can safely say that he was one of the devotees who was well liked throughout the society at that time and even at the present. He was a wonderful Vaishnava, inspired others in chanting Hare Krishna, which he would do all day long while out on Harinam, and brought a lot of others to Krishna consciousness. It was a wonderful memory, nice memory of a wonderful Vaishnava. Hare Krishna.
This is the special net of Lord Chaitanya, which has been emanated for the benefit of this age of Kali, which is made to make the unsurrendered surrendered. Not by actual force, but by the force of attraction. This is Lord Chaitanya's force. That his attraction is so powerful that no one can avoid it. You may avoid accepting Krishna as God. You may avoid accepting Krishna's Adi-lila as transcendental, just as it's being done in India and all over the world. Everyone is thinking of Krishna's Adi-lila as mundane, as something of the material world. So you can discredit Krishna in so many ways. But Lord Chaitanya accepted the position of a sannyasi. In this way he demanded respect because of his renunciation. Not only did he accept the position of a sannyasi, but he performed Sankirtan. In other words, while being a sannyasi, he performed an activity which ordinarily sannyasis do not do. Namely, singing, which is one of the things forbidden for the Mayavadi sannyasis, playing on musical instruments, which is another thing forbidden for Mayavadi sannyasis, and also this dancing, which is another thing forbidden for Mayavadi sannyasis. Plus, he ate opulent prasadam, which is definitely forbidden for the Mayavadi sannyasis. So Lord Chaitanya, although accepting the position of renunciation, he introduced a process for self-realization in the sannyas order, which could be acceptable even by a little child. Because a little child can sing, a little child can dance, a little child can play on musical instruments, and a little child can eat opulent prasadam. Therefore, although he demanded respect by accepting sannyas, although there's no way one can misunderstand his position as a great devotee and a great teacher, still he introduced a process which would attract even little children, and also atheists and Gnostics and impersonalists of all categories. Namely, this process of chanting, dancing, and distributing prasadam. Bhaktivinoda Thakur stated that he was leaving this planet with his work unfinished.
Let us finish. We are descendants of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He kept unfinished so that we shall get the chance to finish it. That is his mercy. He could have finished immediately. He's Vaishnava, he's all powerful. But he gave us a chance. It is Bhaktivinoda Thakur's mercy.
Vishnujan had asked Prabhupada on a morning walk on the roof of the building, how was Chota Haridas delivered by committing suicide after his offense? So Vishnujan had been thinking about that question probably for days. He said, Srila Prabhupada, can I ask a question? And his voice cracked while he said it. And I looked up because his voice was so emotional. And Prabhupada looked at him and he said, yes. And then he asked him that question. And then Prabhupada said something to the effect that, yes, if a sannyasi does that, then it is better that he kill himself. And while he was talking, Vishnujan looked away. He looked off to the side. And then Prabhupada said, but that is an exemplary punishment. It is not meant to be taken literally. And he stopped and walked on. And Vishnujan never heard the last part of the answer. Something happened and he was feeling very guilty and bad about it. I marked, that's why he's been different since I saw him on the way from New York. He was pale, and he was staring off into space, and he looked completely distant and detached from his surroundings. And I had never seen him like that in years. He was always energetic, enthusiastic, had a lot of effulgence, and he was busy. I grew up with him. We played in Grandma's backyard from the time we were a year old together. He and I had a significant thing. We lived in the same house in the Haight-Ashbury. He joined 6 months before I did. If it hadn't been for him, I probably never would have become a devotee. The last thing Vishnujan said to me was, whatever you do, try to do something beautiful for Prabhupada. I told him I do. Anyway, I don't see Vishnujan again until the walk. After he asked that question, I marked, he's thinking about suicide. You have to talk to him. He didn't hear the end of the answer. So I'm thinking, as soon as I get a chance, I'm going to talk to him. By the time the crowd dispersed, we got down to the morning program, which was right afterward. I didn't see Vishnujan at the program. He disappeared. I never set eyes on him again. I never got a chance to talk to him.
When my offenses ceasing, taste for the name increasing, when in my heart will your mercy shine? When, oh when will that day be mine?
So we're running out of time. I'll just quickly read what I was supposed to read, some remembrances. As you can see, the topic is pretty much related to Chota Haridasa story. I'm not qualified to judge what is right and what is wrong, because spiritual life is like a razor's blade. The balance is the key word. So it's a fine line. It's balance in devotional service. So I'll just read that and we'll call it a day. That's from Haridasa Pandit's remembrances, Srila Prabhupada's disciple. Vishnujan Swami's disappearance from this material world was due to a misunderstanding. He thought he was following the order of the spiritual master. He didn't hear the whole instruction. Vishnujan Maharaj was a very advanced sannyasi, and he enlivened everyone, everywhere he went, with his humility, love, and devotion. So many people were inspired by him and became new or better devotees. I was fortunate enough to spend my first year in Krishna consciousness with him in 1974. It was an ecstatic time with all-day kirtans every day at temples, parks, gathering places, and universities. There was no time for Maya. Before Vishnujana joined the Hare Krishna movement back in the summer of love, he had separated from his wife because she did not want to join the Hare Krishna movement. He would see her at Ratha Yatras now and then and try to convince her to be a devotee. He last talked to her at the 1975 San Francisco Ratha Yatra. Vishnujana was told later that it was considered a fall down for him to talk to his ex-wife since he was a sannyasi. It was considered to be subtle sex. Although I am sure Vishnujana was pure in his intentions and did nothing wrong, it still seemed to bother him to be accused in that way. Vishnujana Swami went to India for the 1976 Gaura Purnima festival. The devotees reserved the whole 747 to fly to India, which was the first time and maybe last. A whole plane was booked full of devotees from the west, the Radha Damodara traveling Sankirtan and Pari. Excuse me. Vishnujana Swami went on a walk with Srila Prabhupada and a group of devotees on the rooftop of the Lotus building. Walking just beside and a little behind Srila Prabhupada, Vishnujana took the opportunity and asked him what a sannyasi should do if he has a fall down. Srila Prabhupada answered that just like Chota Haridasa, he should commit suicide in the holy rivers at Prayag. Vishnujana Swami stopped in his tracks when he heard this, thinking Srila Prabhupada was done speaking about it. Vishnujana stopped and Srila Prabhupada kept walking and not looking back to see that Vishnujana had stopped. Continued to say that in this age the atonement is to re-engage in devotional service. That is our atonement. There were quite a few devotees around Srila Prabhupada as he walked, including Madhudvisha Prabhu, who was standing next to them, and he heard the conversation. Later, Vishnujana Swami went to Prayag, where Chota Haridasa from Chaitanya Lila had committed suicide, and paid a few Brahmin priests to help him do the deed. They chanted special mantras so that he would not take a ghost body. Normally, people who commit suicide or die intoxicated take a ghost body in their next life. Vishnujana is said to have tied rocks to his clothes, and he jumped off the boat into the holy waters after the sacrificial mantras were chanted by the Brahmin priests. The Brahmins went to the New Delhi temple and told the devotees about the white sannyasi. The news started to spread like wildfire and finally got to Srila Prabhupada in his new quarters in Bombay in April of 1977. Srila Prabhupada was sitting in his new quarters when his secretary Tamal Krishna Maharaj began to tell Srila Prabhupada about the disappearance of Vishnujana Maharaj. I had just become one of Srila Prabhupada's personal servants and was there listening also, and I was very interested in my favorite devotee, Vishnujana Maharaj. Tamal Krishna Goswami told Srila Prabhupada that he still had Vishnujana's passport and he had not applied for a new passport to leave India. He mentioned the Brahmanas who went to the Delhi temple and said a white sannyasi had come to them to get their help to do a sacred suicide, and he was pretty sure the white sannyasi was Vishnujana Maharaj. At that point, Srila Prabhupada started to cry. He turned his head away and gazed out the window and said he did not have to do that. Tamal Krishna Goswami asked if Srila Prabhupada knew where Vishnujana was. Srila Prabhupada said, Vishnujana is very advanced. He is still chanting Hare Krishna. He is very advanced. It was obvious that Srila Prabhupada did not want to talk about it anymore, and he turned toward the window again. He loved Vishnujana Swami so much, who was a Harinam pioneer in the moment. In LA, when Srila Prabhupada heard Vishnujana Swami chanting, he said, I am walking in Vaikuntha, I am walking in Vaikuntha, I am walking in Vaikuntha. About 2 weeks later in Bombay, Srila Prabhupada told us that Vishnujana was chanting to him in his dreams. Chota Haridasa chanted for Lord Chaitanya after he committed suicide at Prayaga and appeared as a celestial singer, a Gandharva. I felt better about the incident after hearing that from Srila Prabhupada. Later, I also had a dream about Vishnujana. I was following him up a mountain trail when he stopped and turned to me and told me to wait. He said I was not ready to go further yet. So reluctantly I stood and watched as my first spiritual mentor, Vishnujana Swami, disappeared in the distance up the trail. For Vishnujana Swami, Jayananda Prabhu, and then Srila Prabhupada to leave the planet, all in 1976-1977, was a great loss for all of us. We can remember that they still exist in the spiritual world, and their great pastimes here and gain inspiration. Hopefully, when it's time, we'll be fortunate enough to join them again forever in Krishna Loka. Thank you very much. I don't think we have time for questions. But if there is one short question or comment, please go ahead.
I was just wondering, in Govardhana Temple, is it mentioned who Chota Haridasa is in Krishna Lila?
I'm not sure who Chota Haridasa is in Krishna Lila. Yeah. If anyone knows, please. No. Yeah.
Who was that last person speaking?
Gauridas Pandit. I also have some remembrances from Suhotra Swami, but I think we're over time now. But it's pretty sweet. He was describing how who Vishnujana was before joining the Hare Krishna movement, how Srila Prabhupada chastised him and criticized, and yeah, if you want, it's just maybe 3 minutes, so I can read it. So this is from the book, maybe not a book, maybe an article called "Listen, Vishnujana Maharaj is Singing" by Suhotra Maharaja. Before meeting Srila Prabhupada, Vishnujana lived in a tree on the Morning Star Range, which was a hippie commune outside of San Francisco. His name was Mark, and his best friend was Tom, later to be initiated as Tamal Krishna Das Brahmachari. Mark would sometimes come into the city to make a little money by selling wooden flutes that he'd carve on the farm. He'd sit with the flutes spread out on the sidewalk at Haight-Ashbury, sometimes wearing nothing but a blanket with a hole in the center through which he thrust his head. He started visiting the temple on Frederick Street to join in the kirtanas. When the kirtana ended and Srila Prabhupada started the lecture, Mark would stretch out on the floor and go to sleep, sometimes keeping his head on the lap of a girlfriend. Before joining ISKCON, he got married. His wife was very attached to him. She did not agree to join, so they separated painfully. Vishnujan Maharaj told me that he became serious about journeying after Srila Prabhupada referred to him in his lecture, or perhaps it was an instruction to the temple managers, as an example of a demon. It had to do with his sleeping in the class. Sometimes, like, here is a demon, even he gets the opportunity to purify himself, he goes back to Maya. So, then go. Don't come back again and again to do your nonsense here. That's not meant to be a quotation. It was Srila Prabhupada's mood, as least as Mark understood it then. It shook him up. Later, after he had been initiated, Srila Prabhupada praised him. You are advancing nicely. It is by your mercy, Srila Prabhupada, Vishnujana answered. No, not like that. My mercy is open to everyone. You are taking it. Vishnujana had attracted that praise of his divine grace because of his ecstatic kirtanas, but sometimes Srila Prabhupada had to chastise him still. Once Srila Prabhupada was driven to see the evening chanting party in the Los Angeles streets. Vishnujana, as usual, was leading, but he was playing two mridangas at the same time. Srila Prabhupada commented, he cannot even play one mridanga properly, yet he beats two. From somewhere, Vishnujana picks up a Mirabai song that goes Gopala, Gopala, Devakinandana Gopala, 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 Yashomatinandana Gopala. Srila Prabhupada told him to stop singing it. It may have been sung by great devotees, he said, but it was not sung by great authorities. Being a musically talented person, Vishnujana would invent melodies for the Mahamantra. Once Srila Prabhupada saw him composing a melody at the harmonium. And what is wrong with my melodies? His Divine Grace demanded. Once Prabhupada asked why so many American gentlemen would go on walks with dogs on leashes. Vishnujana answered, so they can watch how their dogs are nicely passing stool. Srila Prabhupada laughed and laughed at this. Vishnujana Maharaj told us that he had personally witnessed Srila Prabhupada talking to his spiritual master's photograph, eyes flooded with tears. About Vishnujana Swami, Srila Prabhupada said, by his singing alone he can go back to Godhead. Maharaj loved Sri Shirada Damodara. Here is the proof. One morning at 4 a.m. he was preparing their lordships for Mangalarati. By this time, we'd left Atlanta, so it was a bus. They were traveling Sankirtan party. We were somewhere in the south, where winters are milder than northern states, like New York. But this morning it was so cold, and there was no proper heating system on the bus. It was so frozen that Maharaji couldn't move his fingers properly. I remember him so clearly coming out from behind the velvet deity curtains, bundled up against the cold, a forlorn look on his face. It's so cold, I can't control my senses to serve their lordships, he lamented. He was not complaining about the cold for himself, he was complaining for the sake of the deities. That is love. I will stop here. Thank you very much. Yes? That's it. Yeah, thank you so much. Grantaraj, Shri Chaitanya Charitamrita ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Vishnujan Swami ki jai.